Heyo, I'm laying on my floor because I was too lazy to set up the mic, and it was pointed toward the floor. But we're unlocking a Patreon episode for you today. This was a fun one we did earlier this year with Case Aiken. He's become a fan favorite and an us favorite. Got a lot of great insights, and we're talking about the unbelievably good and unbelievably cool Trainspotting. So we thought you'd enjoy this. If you want to hear the next movie covered, you got to sign up for Patreon and listen to T2 Trainspotting, which is an unbelievable movie and one of the best legacy sequels. So tune in, enjoy this episode, and then sign up for Patreon while you're at it. Get a free trial. And thanks again for Case for being on this episode. This is the Macabre Podcast Universe. It's the podcast that exists to
prove people wrong when they say
sequels
are never
better
than
the
originals.
And I never wear hats when we record.
Hello.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to MPU, the sequel, another legacy, where we're behind the paywall talking about movie franchises that have two entries, and at least 15 plus years in between them. Mm-hmm. And that's our big exploration this year.
What did we do first?
We did Tron. Yeah. Because that was what we gathered as kind of the modern legacy, literally Tron Legacy.
Yeah.
Like attempt at doing that. And now that one is the one that the sequel kind of follows the same formula as the first movie and then kind of improves upon it and it has that conversation with the sequels. Now we're covering a series that the second movie kind of has an opposite conversation with itself, which I'm excited to do. We won't talk about that part in this part. Now we're just going to talk about the masterpiece that is Danny Boyle's Trainspotting. And with us, we have a guest that many listeners said was their favorite episode of the podcast.
Aww.
And so it is the return of, but the premiere on this side of it all, Case Aiken. Welcome back to the show.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me back on the show. That is such a nice thing to lead off on the intro.
Yeah,
it's true. My sister, who has always been right there at the beginning, listens to all of them, usually watches along. I feel like it was a few weeks after Logan was like, Logan was your best episode you've had. I loved the guest. And I'm like, okay, great. I mean, I thought it was good too, but you never know what other people are going to think. Yeah. So,
I mean, that was a great conversation in general about a great movie. It was a movie that really invited that kind of conversation about all the different themes. And today, frankly, is in the same category.
Yeah.
Before we go any further into conversation, have you guys seen this movie before?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. How long ago had you guys seen this movie?
A bit. I feel like
I'd say probably 10 years since I've seen this.
Trainspotting I saw around the time I was getting into movies. So it just was dogpiled on all these other classic movies I was watching. So kind of, I feel like in a good way, I didn't remember a lot of this movie while we were watching it.
I kind of only remembered the toilet scene and the baby on the ceiling.
That's the baby on the ceiling I remember. And bits and pieces and whatnot, but yeah.
Well, and that's frankly the big takeaway that I want to have with the two of you right now, which is that, so for listeners at home, all of us have recently become parents. The two of you obviously together and me with my wife, and within a month of each other. So
it's crazy.
We are very synced up in terms of the changes in our life going into this movie. And when you talk about Trainspotting, either they say, oh, the heroin movie, or they say, oh, the one with the baby on the ceiling. Those are the only two ways to talk about this movie from a layman perspective. And I used to tap mainline this movie like in in college. I was like obsessed with it because it was just like one of the same, like that selection of like, oh, here are the indie movies that are really, really hip and really cool. And like I think I related to the youthful energy of some of the characters in this movie a lot. And equated it with other things like Snatch, you know, like there was like a British invasion for around like the mid 2000s, or late, like early 2000s going into mid 2000s. And so like it felt like, oh, well, here is a lower stakes version of kind of a similar big bombastic, you know, like Brit, Scott, like United Kingdom kind of like thing. And aided by the fact that the editing's great, the music's great. Like this is an oops all banger kind of movie.
It's crazy.
Which we'll get into all of that, but like, God fucking damn it! As an adult with a wife and a newborn child, you know, going on infant, man. Every shot that shows the baby is so fucking ominous. Like,
it's a different point of view. On this side of things.
I was so excited to talk to the two of you about it because, like, man, my perspective is just so radically different since it's probably been like, it's been 20 years since I was like obsessed with this movie and probably about 15 years since I'd watched it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, so it was a long time for you as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I think you already just said this for you, but at least for me, this was like, you know, late high school, out of high school, years of going through like IMDb's top 250 and just like picking movies, going to Blockbuster, going to the library, and just watching all these movies. So I think this one actually was on Netflix when I watched it the first time. And I watched it and I was like, great. But of course, like something like the baby scene or the death of the baby, it's like, oh man, that's really sad. At a, you know, like arm's length away. It's like, oh yeah, that's sad. Drugs are bad. You know, it's kind of like my whole thing as I'm watching the movie. But watching it now, it's like, oh, you know, it hits in a completely different way. So yeah, maybe, I don't know. Do you want to have that conversation right off the bat, or do you want to?
I mean, I'm not trying to like swing with like the hardest fastball right there, but I mean, I think rewatching this movie, I was astounded by the sadness of the state of being of these characters in a way that I wasn't when I was younger. Like it's shite being Scottish is very true for all of them, including their parents. And I realized how much I saw their parents in this movie and how much these familial relationships in this tight community. Like, you know, there's the early statement after Begbie gives this whole story of like, you know, that is a complete bullshit and then turns into a bar fight. And we see Tommy go like, but he's a mate. So what are you going to do? And that is so true for so many characters in this. There's this whole like community aspect to it that is built on this like understanding that we all have each other's backs, including everyone's parents. And then they all kind of screw each other over in certain ways, but particularly Rent screws everyone around him. Subtly, because they all kind of trust him. He's the everyman. He's the, you know, he's the viewpoint character in this all. Right. Like, and as a result, kind of the least dynamic of them because he's the main character. But he's also the one who, without a doubt, actually screws people over the most, even though he assures us that, at least in the case of Sick Boy, that he would do it just as much.
But that's his warped perception. We don't know an objective truth about that, because this is
always
one of those,
what he said.
Yeah, one of those great movies that it's so point of view heavy. And we are only in his
your
point
unreliable
of view.
narrator stuff.
Yeah. And when you talk about like the difference between watching this when you're 20 and 30, you know, I think about, you know, the movie starts with that great speech, which we'll probably talk a little bit more of when we actually go into it. But this movie on this watch, I just kept thinking about Fight Club and how when I'm 20 watching Fight Club and when I'm 20 watching Trainspotting, there's part of me that's like, yeah. Like, screw family, screw the 9 to 5, screw the establishment, all this stuff. And now I watch those movies and I see like how much satire is in them and how, you know, it is like those movies used to trick me into thinking that's what I wanted. Not the drug part of it, but like just that.
But the
feeling
punk
of
aspect of it all, like the whole choose life speech at the beginning and the fact that he's such the villain of the piece at the very end, and he's saying he's going to choose life from this point on. Like those are the spots where you're like, well, no, I want to be part of the counterculture. Like even though Spud isn't like a winner, you like Spud, and you're like, I want to be over here where it's like a little bit edgy and like, you know, like we've all screwed up a little bit because we should feel free to not make a perfect life for ourselves. We should feel free to make mistakes and to mess up.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And then at 30, watching it, and I'm like, I don't want any of this. You know, like I like to watch it, but this is just so and not even like, oh, I gave up on my dreams or whatever. It's just like, oh, I those things, like, you know, if particularly the way both these, you know, I'm lumping Fight Club in with this just because of the point of view. You know, the way they're so flippant about family, and how the older I get, the more it's like, well, that's way more important than so many of these other things that I prioritized in my 20s.
Yeah.
And that's why, I mean, and you had told me when we were messaging about this movie that you hadn't seen the sequel. And I think that's why the sequel to this movie, from my memory, is so freaking good, because it's having that conversation of like, in 20 years, are these guys fun to be around? And the answer is no. These are like the most annoying people in the world. And
they're barely fun to be around now. And it's sort of like, it's sort of like, well, but they're your mates, so what are you going to do?
Exactly. Yeah.
So, I'm going to highly encourage you to watch it, because it's a pretty wild ride, and it's a pretty interesting, you know, because especially when we're talking about sequels, you know, that there's such a nostalgic element to them. And waiting 20 years to make a sequel, and then the movie is like not about nostalgia, or it is about nostalgia, but not in the like, those were the good old days kind of way.
Yeah.
It's pretty interesting.
Oh God, no. Like I still haven't seen it, but I can't imagine a movie that's like, oh, these were the good old days.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
But yeah, let me get into who made it for our listeners here. We got Danny Boyle, who's one of the all-time greats. This is his second movie. His first movie is Shallow Grave, which we still need to watch. Have you seen Shallow Grave?
I haven't.
Heard it's great. So, gotta watch it. Stars Ewan McGregor. And then the screenplay is by John Hodge, who has done Shallow Grave, A Life Less Ordinary, and The Beach, which are all Danny Boyle movies. And then the book is by Irvin Welsh that this is based on. I didn't find any information on whether this is, you know, him being, because you had asked if this is kind of like autobiographical.
Yeah.
I didn't see anything about that.
Okay.
I didn't dig too hard, though. I think he just wanted to write about heroin.
Yeah.
From what I could tell. So here's something about the novel, though. It's split into 7 sections. The first 6 sections contain multiple chapters from various perspectives. The final section contains one chapter. The novel's plot is nonlinear. Most chapters are narrated in first-person stream of consciousness style in some combination of Scots and Standard English. And some chapters are written from a third-person omniscient stance to convey the actions and thoughts of several characters in a scene.
Okay.
So they're definitely trying to bring that into this movie. The cinematographer is Brian Tufano, who is, as I wrote, a Boyle boy. And he also did additional photography on the original Blade Runner, which I thought was quite interesting. $3.1 million budget, makes 16.5 in the U.S., makes 71 worldwide.
Wow.
This is a huge hit.
Yeah.
This is the kind of movie, if you don't have the context for, you might think, oh, this is a cult classic. No, this was a hit like right off the gate.
Yeah.
And it was a hit internationally.
Yeah.
So,
well, relatively speaking, you know, like huge hit based on that budget.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, this isn't Endgame or something like that. But I mean, you know, 3.1 million, 71. That is. Oh,
it's huge. It's huge. But like, there are those stories of like Halloween. You know, like relatively speaking.
Yeah.
Yes. You're right. And I
because it is also a cult classic. Like that is also true.
Yeah. I guess you're right. Yeah. I gotta look up the release date. I always do that, and I forgot to write that one down.
It's February 23rd, 1996.
Okay. Thank you. 96. So because we were talking about this, and then is Fight Club 99 or 98?
Is that what we saw? Something like that.
It's around there.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting. I mean, my thought, having not lived through the 80s, is that these movies,
there was just in the air this response to like the over excess of the 80s, and just like all of these young men in a lot of these stories just being like, oh my gosh, we can't do what everyone else has done in these countries, and not knowing how to turn that into something good. So you have that. The producer McDonald reads this book in 93. He goes to Boyle and Hodge in February of 94. And Boyle is like, I am so excited to make this. He says, quote, we could make the most energetic film you've ever seen about something that ultimately ends up in purgatory or worse. Check on that. Mission accomplished. Hodge set out to make a 90-minute movie that has beginning, middle, and end. And judging by the source material, that seems like quite the feat.
Yeah.
McGregor shaved his head, and he lost 2 stones.
Yeah, and that means
12.7 kilos, Jordan.
And then that also means
27 pounds. Ewan, is it Bremer or Bremner? I think my phone auto-corrected.
I've heard Bremer just in terms of how you pronounce it.
Okay.
But but there is an N in there.
Bremner. I mean, there's an N.
Bremner.
Yeah.
He played Renton in a stage adaptation of this before the movie was made.
Interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, but then McGregor gets the role. McGregor reads books about crack and heroin. He meets with people from the Calton Athletic Recovery Group, who are it's an organization of recovering heroin addicts who play the opposing football team in the opening credits. And he was taught how to cook heroin with a spoon using glucose powder. And he decided against his consideration to shoot up to better understand the characterization.
That's smart.
And I think, good job, Ewan.
Yeah.
Because the budget was so low and the time was so constricted, they shot a lot of the scenes in one take.
Okay.
Which is insane to me.
Yeah.
When he...
That does explain why the movie is so, like, rapid fire, though.
Yes.
Yeah.
Where it's like, say this fucking line.
Yeah.
Well, and it probably adds to some of the, like, naturalistic elements of this. Like, you can't overthink it when you get one take. You just have to do it.
Yeah.
That's in the school of Clint Eastwood. He probably saw this movie and was like, that's what I want to do when I direct. No more
Get
2
you home
takes.
on time.
And then let's see. I got a couple more notes here. When he sinks into the floor, they built a platform with a trap door and lower him into it.
Okay, cool.
So cool.
That was awesome.
The score is divided into 3 distinct groups. The first being pop music from the 1970s. Lou Reed, Iggy Pop, all musicians closely associated with drug use and referred to throughout the original novel. The second group is music from the Britpop era in the 1990s with bands Blur and Pulp. Finally, there's a techno dance music from the 1990s, including Underworld, Bedrock, and Ice MC.
Interesting.
Which I did not pick up on, but I also am not a musician historian.
No, it's harder to see in post because it all kind of feels like of a time. But like, now that you say it, I'm like, oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense because like that like Britpop is a thing that kind of comes into the middle and like, like Born Slippy, like the end track for the movie is like one of my favorite endings of a movie. Like as far as like music goes, like it's a great song. It feels like a trance version of Mr. Brightside.
I'd have to listen to it again, but yeah, interesting.
And like, I'm like, oh, okay, that all makes sense that's very electronic at the very end, but like also like at a certain point you kind of just in the scene. And so it feels more like a score as opposed to like, here's like needle drops. Versus at the beginning of the movie, there's way more needle drops because they are referencing constantly the music that's in there. So that all makes a ton of sense. It's just it kind of blurs together as here's this oops all bangers of a soundtrack. Yeah.
It's wild, and that's definitely a signature, just like Tarantino or even Wes Anderson. Like when you see a Danny Boyle movie, most likely you're gonna have a banger soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
And this movie, I saw that it is like it's significant as like one of the great soundtracks.
For
a
really?
movie. Like on lists where they compile best soundtracks, it's often in the top 10 and stuff like that. So, and it absolutely makes sense. And And this speaks to what you were just saying, Case. The Trainspotting soundtrack aimed to champion the alternative music legacy of 96 Britain with a focus on presenting electronic music on equal footing with rock music in a way that had never been done before.
Got it.
Yeah, pretty cool. And then in Boyle's view, which this is great, songs can be, quote, amazing things to use because they obviously bring a lot of baggage with them. Mm-hmm. They may have painful associations, and so they interbreathe with the material you're using, which is great. That's why when people waste needle drops in movies, it's very annoying.
Yeah.
Because you can actually use it as like another layer in the filmmaking.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are the notes I have on Trainspotting.
Great.
You mentioning that it was a staged adaptation that Ewan Bremer, however it is, said,
Spud
makes so much sense because there are so many shots, and particularly the platform descending, like the falling into the floor scene, like that reads such like a stage scene, like a stage play kind of sequence.
Yep.
That I have to imagine now that because I had no idea that it was a stage show, but I'm like, oh, that makes a ton of sense because there's so many elements of this movie that are impossible to do on stage because they're trying to convey this thing that I have to assume they had like a different person narrating versus otherwise because. Otherwise, I can't even like begin to guess like what who would make this a play. But yeah, there are moments like that which like certainly feel like, oh yeah, that's how you would do it on stage, like that you would have a trapdoor like fall down, right there, or the same for to a certain degree of the worst toilet in Scotland sequence.
Yeah,
which, like I love, but at the same time also feels like an anomaly in the movie.
Yeah. It's such a like weird fantasy kind of thing. But yeah, I am curious because I didn't see anything in it as far as Hodges like seeing the play or like using that for inspiration. So I don't know if those are just like two separate lines of thought or how that breaks down really. Mm-hmm. I'm not really sure.
Or did Boyle see the play for those like specific scenes? Like,
yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Could have been a lot of people. Also, if Ewan Brenner was there, then he would be able to just like say, oh, this is how we did it. So,
true.
Yeah. But I also wonder, especially like seeing how that novel is laid out, like, you know, it sounds like there's probably a lot of different ways to tell the same story. I wonder if there's like a bootleg out there of this play.
Yeah, there might be. Yeah, I imagine it's one of those books based on how you described it was written that you read it and you're like, well, that's unfilmable.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then they make one of the coolest movies ever.
Yeah. Well, and watching this, it just reminded me of Reservoir Dogs in the feeling of, I feel like when you watch, I mean, this is my experience, when you watch Reservoir Dogs and you watch this movie, I see everything that came after it and all the imitations of it and how few times, if ever, people have like actually captured those moments and those movements the way that Tarantino did when he brought that form in with Reservoir Dogs, and I'd lump Pulp Fiction in there as well. But and this movie, it's like I see all of the movies that are like, we're gonna do the Trainspotting thing, and how much, at least in my opinion, most if not all those movies like pale in comparison to this movie. Mm-hmm. It just kind of like sets this template that is hard to even live up to.
Yeah.
You see, now I'm looking up, like, what year did Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas come out? And like, oh, it's 98. And I feel like that's a similar kind of scenario of someone watching Trainspotting and being like, okay, this is a first-person narrator. This is how you do it. And then, like, taking the notes and doing, you know, a Terry Gilliam version of that.
Yeah. I still have yet to pull the trigger on that. I have not seen Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. I'll admit it here on this podcast.
I mean, talk about another movie that I was obsessed with, even though I was like not that adventurous in terms of substances in college. Like it was just like, yeah, man, like we're totally into all these movies where they do heroin and coke and like all this stuff. It's like, what do? Beer and weed.
Well, I mean, I'm sure you like a lot of movies where people murder. Right.
Also true. Yeah. And staunchly against murder as a general thing.
Well, there's something about this movie.
Controversially.
Like this, movies like this that they're they're very cathartic. Because again, I don't have a drug past or anything either, but there is something about them that is so cathartic. And it is interesting, especially watching it the second time. I just felt so much, probably more dread than the first time I watched it because I kind of knew stuff.
Yep.
But it's at the same time, it's like, but also it's like badass, and it's like, but they're not cool.
Yeah,
right.
They're bad people.
Well, I think beyond, like, if you take...
They even say they're bad people in this
movie. Exactly. But maybe,
the truth is, I'm a bad person.
Yeah, in the my early 20s, though, it's just like, yeah, they are bad, and they're cool, and I don't have, I don't have the gumption to be that bad, but it's cool to watch other people,
right?
Even though even at that time I disagreed with that lifestyle as well.
So let me throw out a connection that I only made when we started this call, but now that I made it, I can't resist this similarity here.
Okay.
Which is, this movie feels like a Euro version of Rent.
I'm not familiar with Rent.
Same.
I'm sorry.
Okay, so here's the nutshell version of it. It's about people who are various elements of counterculture in New York City, in the Lower East Side, in the early 90s / late 80s, because it's kind of sort of based on a real period, but then like the movie... Or not the movie, the musical came out like so many years later and didn't explicitly state that it was part of a period piece.
Gotcha. Okay.
But one of the big plot threads is that like a sizable group of the cast are have AIDS as a result of either heroin or because of homosexuality. And so because this is also the AIDS epidemic, there's like that element going on, but also the heroin thing. Rent is about a bunch of fuck ups, and like it's about a bunch of fuck ups who are making the most of the fact that they are young in an environment and doing not that well for life, but they could do better if they just like applied themselves, but they're kind of intentionally so, or at least like a percentage of the cast is. Like there's this whole joke about how in Rent, actually like half the show is about people who could just like go home and get a job if they wanted to, but they decide that they want to slum it with like the people who like are actually social outcasts because of being gay or being, trans or being like whatever. And so that dynamic is like there in Rent, and like I would argue Rent is a show that has a lot going for it, that because the composer died before they went into previews, they weren't able to iron out some of the things, and then also just some of the things just don't hold up because it was the 90s, and like there was like a lot of like we can do it gumption that didn't really prove to be true. I think this movie has that same we can do it gumption. Like the characters are living in the same kind of destitute life, but because they're young, there's kind of this hip quality to it. There's some sexiness to the life they're in, even though like ultimately, from a broad view, I relate more to the parents now. Like I relate so much to James Cosmo, not just because I want to be James Cosmo, because he's so cool. He's
if your name's Cosmo, I mean, you're pretty much set.
It's just that it's like, hey, we're young in this period, and even though we're kind of destitute and everything's terrible, like there's something kind of like delicious about being young.
Yeah, totally.
Yes, that's a great way to put it.
I think with the alluring thing about this movie is they are making these terrible choices, but it's like, but they're making it for themselves. On one hand, you have that. Yeah. And it's like they are living life how they want to live it. It's just honestly a bad choice, and you see how it gets worse. And it's kind of that classic story of drug abuse where it's like it's great, and then eventually it's not great. And then there's the whole swinging of everything. But yeah, it's just so, I don't know, watching it now being older, it's just, if it looks like people that are just like, I don't want to make those important decisions. I would rather just stay here. But yeah.
Well, and something that I love about this movie is, which is such a youthful way to look at things, is like the flippancy of life, and the flippancy by which our main character is like, oh yeah, I'm getting off drugs. Okay, I'm back on drugs. Oops, I'm going to take one more hit. Oh, well, it's so flippant, but I think you have like young and hungry actors and director and writer who are like, are experiencing that in like their careers and stuff, where they're like, we can do this thing.
Yeah, and I think there's an element of like
we're gonna take on the world.
There's still time for me, and I think
yes.
Renton's character, because he is our protagonist mostly, where he's like, I can just do one more hit because it's fine, because then tomorrow I'll get clean.
Well, and then it's just also portraying that cycle of addiction.
Mm-hmm.
But what I think is because watching movies like this, especially as I get older, can often be when it's not treated respectfully, it can feel very like, what are we even doing here? Is this just for shock's sake, et cetera, et cetera? And I think I'm sitting there watching this and I'm like, this movie is so flippant. Why does this movie work and so many others that do this to me feel not like this? And I think for me, what works is then the intense reality scenes that pop up every like 20 minutes, where it's like something real happens and they have to face it, and then they choose not to face it. So like as much as a parent now, seeing this baby death scene is awful. I don't want to see that. And actually, since I hadn't seen it in so long, I was not able to skip it as we had previously discussed doing. Because I didn't remember what was shown and what was shown.
Yeah.
So wound up just watching that scene. But it's like, I think that scene is so much more powerful. Like, it's been a long time since I've seen Requiem for a Dream, but I feel like this movie's almost a better depiction of like anti-drugs than that movie, which is so anti-drugs, because it's almost like it's not even showing the like fun that these people would have and making it realistic in that way, from what I remember. Maybe that's unfair to Requiem, but
I think that's fair, because I think that this movie is like, the fun is the zoning out. The fun is the fact that it goes into a montage when they're like heavily in drugs.
Yep.
Like, it forces us to face the problems of their lifestyle, and it forces us to face those problems in more realistic ways. Like, when things are really bad, those are the moments where it's less stylistic, like
you're right.
We really have like, God damn it. Like, okay, everyone talks about the crawling on the ceiling baby, but that's not the thing that really got me. The thing that really got me was, one, knowing that it was happening, or that it was coming, and every time we saw the baby beforehand, and just being like, oh my God, just get it over with, just get it over with. But then, like, look, the crawling baby on the ceiling doesn't look real, because it, like, uncanny valley is woe, and like you just know it's not a real baby.
Yeah.
The baby in the crib, that's the shot that really gets me.
Yeah,
and like,
absolutely, yeah.
That's the one where you're like, there's no stylized aspect to this. They're just like in it in the moment, and it sucks and it is terrible. And like you said, like Rin's choice is to turn around and be like, I'm cooking up. And like, even the mom, like that's her choice too, because the other option is face reality.
Yeah.
And Requiem for a Dream, the benefit there is that those are more stylized sequences when things are getting really bad. Like, you see how rough it gets, and it all just feels like very dramatic and mean. Does that mean like one is better than the other? I don't know. Like, I rewatched Trainspotting a lot. I haven't rewatched Requiem for a Dream a lot, because I don't want to rewatch Requiem for a Dream. This is the one that sticks with me in terms of what the consequences are. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and again, no, I'm not trying to throw shade at Requiem. I've watched it one time, but again, it is which not every movie needs to be a rewatchable movie, but it's not rewatchable. It's just
no.
There's no. I don't ever foresee a time when I'll be like, I'm ready to give that old movie a good try again.
Yeah.
The only scenario is when you have to share it with someone else.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. In which case I go, okay, you can go in that room and watch that, and I'm going to watch Guardians 3 again or something like that.
That uplifting movie.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. But, but yeah, there's just something, it's such a hard needle to thread to needle. How does that expression go?
Needle to thread.
Needle to thread. It's a hard needle to thread of that. We're having fun and we're showing the realism of joy and expression and youth, and then those flashes to hard reality. And I think that's why this movie is is so great and has endured for so long. One of the many reasons. This time around, I have to say, the first time, I was like, oh yeah, it's a great movie. This time I was like, oh, this is a perfect movie. I'm putting this in the like 5-star camp. It's just incredible. I'm going to have nothing bad to say about this movie.
Honestly, I got to say totally. Like I mentioned, the soundtrack, the cast is so good.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
The language use in this, like, we understand the lines that are important, and oftentimes they acknowledge, like, no, sometimes you just don't understand the Scotsmans. Like,
yeah.
It's so well done there. The editing is so good, and the use of voiceover is so specific that it never feels like it is unnecessary. It is often funny.
Yeah.
It's welcome in a way that might not otherwise be. I am just astounded at how much I enjoy the structure of this movie. It is so well put together, just as a work of art.
It's truly a masterpiece, particularly in its editing.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, what other movie ends with revisiting the opening monologue while the credits are rolling, and somehow it hits harder because like the title track is happening while he's saying, or the title card shows up. I don't even get that, but when that moment hits, you're like, no, it feels like they just like walked into the room, Danny Boyle, and he's like hands crossed, and he's like, you liked that, didn't you? That was good, wasn't it? Like, it's just incredible to have that much style. Why don't you hit us with some actors, though? I think we have a lot of newbies we've never covered on this podcast to talk about.
Well,
we just said that the cast is awesome.
Yeah.
Ewan McGregor, of course, we have talked about.
Yeah, he's played who's that character? Obi-Wan? Yeah, that's right.
Something like that. But
like 3 years later.
Ewan Bremner. He is in Wonder Woman. He is in Alien versus Predator. Our Flag Means Death, among many things, as well as
he's been a lot. He's a that guy actor. Like if you ever have like a wiry Scotsman who you don't understand but is like kind of a joke, it's probably him. Yeah.
And then John Lee Miller plays Sick Boy. He is in Aeon Flux, Mindhunters, Dracula 2000, The Covenant, the new.
The Guy Ritchie movie.
Oh, Guy Ritchie. I cannot figure it out. He's also in The Crown, Alice, Settlers, a ton. Kevin McKidd plays Tommy, the blonde guy.
Oh, I know.
Okay,
I know. Come on.
in case.
We all know who Tommy is.
He's in Brave, Kingdom of Heaven, Dog Soldiers, Grey's Anatomy. And it does a lot of voice acting as well.
We got to shout out Rome. He's one of the main characters on Rome and is so good in that.
Oh, okay.
Got it.
Cool.
Robert Carlyle plays Begbie or Begbie? Begbie. Yeah. He is in The Full Monty, Ravenous, The Performance, Cobra, North of Normal, so on and so forth.
Okay.
28 weeks later.
28 weeks later.
Yeah. I still have not. Is 28 weeks later pretty good? I never pulled the trigger on it.
You, if nothing else, watch the opening scene. That's the only part that is directed by Danny Boyle.
Mm.
And
I didn't know
it's like that sequence by itself, it makes the movie worthwhile. I would argue that the opening sequence of 28 Weeks Later is probably better than any one sequence in 28 Days Later. The rest of the movie is like okay. But that opening sequence is so tense, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about when you watch it. You're like, oh, okay, that's the line where he said to stop.
Yeah.
The rest is fine, but like that first part is so worth it.
Yeah.
Even though I really don't have an investment in it as a series, I want nothing more than them to really finally pull the trigger and make 28 Months Later, and just make this, like a George Romero zombie thing where you just keep going. I mean, you can at least get to 28 years, right?
Sure. Why not?
I mean, it's just a brilliant.
We're not that far from
concept.
28 years later in the real world.
There you go.
Yeah,
perfect.
That's true.
Now that we say it,
but you have to do months. You have to stick to the.
Well, yeah, okay. And then Kelly MacDonald plays Diane. She's in No Country for Old Men, also Brave, Gosford Park.
Is Brave like Pixar? Is that what you're?
Oh, yeah, Pixar's Brave.
Yeah, Kelly MacDonald is Merida. She's the voice of the main character in Brave.
Oh, okay.
Still have never seen Brave.
Yeah.
Have you seen Brave?
I've seen every Pixar.
Wow.
Dude.
Okay. Cool. And then who else is notable?
I think you hit the main players.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, I
there's
mentioned
Moaning
James
Myrtle.
Cosmo just to reference. So Ren's dad is James Cosmo, who's a noted character actor. He was in Highlander. He was in Braveheart. He was in Troy. He was in Chronicles of Narnia: The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Wow.
What a career!
Like if you're thinking about a big Scotsman with like a big bushy mustache, like you're thinking about the right man. Also in Brave, I believe. I'm pretty sure he was the dad in Brave.
Oh wow! Okay.
Yeah.
Who is he in Braveheart?
Braveheart, he was the old, like he's the old dad, or like in the village, the one who's like gets his arm cut off and is still fighting after that. Yeah.
He says that'll wake you up in the morning, I think, when he takes out the arrow from his arm, or his son says that, maybe.
Like he's the most badass man in the entire movie.
Yeah, okay. I did not like see that connection when I was watching Trainspotting, but of course Braveheart, my dad, that's the ultimate dad movie, so I've seen that many, many times. So yeah, I can see him now. Okay. I guess we can get into the plot, but I think because this movie, I don't think we need to worry about
beginning to end.
Yeah, we can just talk about this movie, and then by the end, we'll have talked about it.
Yeah. Before this rewatch, I was confident that I remembered every scene in the movie, and that is mostly true. Mm-hmm. But the order in which they happen, I could not have told you.
Gotcha.
It's that kind of a movie that is discontinuous and just sort of throws stuff at you. And in retrospect, I'm like, oh, I see the structure a lot more than when I was young. But there's a lot of like vignettes in it all.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. I guess it like makes sense and doesn't matter if you remember them in order or not, especially if I know it's not literally the book. I'm sure they didn't include everything, but if the book's, sounds a little vignette-y. So like with the movie, I think there's probably an approach as well.
I don't know how intentional this is, but I mean, that is like addiction.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like a cycle. So remembering the movie out of order is almost like thematic.
Yeah.
to this movie. I mean,
especially because this isn't one person's addiction journey. This is a group of people's addiction journey, and it shows all of their different stages and paths with it. Yeah, Ewan or Brenton's kind of like our main dude.
Yeah,
but we do get everyone.
Yeah. Well, they do a really good job in that opening sequence after we get the initial choose life bit where we're showing them running away from the cops, and it's it is the scene from halfway in the movie,
right?
But we're just seeing it at the start. When we see the soccer game, we actually get like a lot of character development that I've usually like kind of like ignored. Until you actually like sit down and rewatch it 20 years later, and you're like, oh, they are telling you everything about each of these characters in very specific detail.
Yeah.
Like Bigby being a sociopath, Tommy getting cornered and like being like beat up upon by the world. Sick Boy blaming everyone else for everything. Mm-hmm. Spud just being, a fuck up and like not being able to stop a ball. Like, and Rent just kind of being there.
Yeah, you're right. What was the thing you told me about the monologue at the beginning of the movie?
I just had read that they weren't sure when to put that monologue because it's obviously, it's a pretty big monologue. It's very significant. And then they just landed on like, why don't we just open the movie with it? Like start the movie with this template rather than like build up to it.
Yeah, that's so interesting to start it like that. And it's pretty like close to the beginning that he's like, oh yeah, I'm off the skag and like I'm gonna I quit.
Yeah.
And all of this stuff, it's just such an interesting way to depict addiction.
Yeah, and so early on they show him when he's going to quit everything, he literally boards up his door, and then it's seemingly like the next shot, the boards are on the floor and he's on the phone. Like it's like he nailed them.
Of course I would need another hit.
Yeah, just one more.
Oh man.
Yeah. But it's so funny. Like that's part of why this movie is so charming. Like they make addiction seem funny and like kind of energetic and like this thing you can do because you're young.
Yep. Yeah. But so I do have a little bit of notes to reference here. I do have the babies pretty close to the beginning, which I didn't remember. Unless, oh no.
Well,
No,
the baby
it's not.
appears for the
Oh,
first time.
I just
at the
wrote that
beginning.
it's
The baby appears a few times before.
Yeah, and
what happens.
she's just in sequences where people
And
are just
I
getting
would say
high.
that the baby is
Yeah.
often happy
Yeah,
playing. I don't think they ever show the baby crying,
yeah.
which is very interesting.
Yeah.
And even
Yeah,
when,
it's
like, by
just
the time the baby dies, like, we're not, like, scenes following up to it, we're not hearing a crying baby in the background starving to death.
Right.
It just is then just dead.
Yeah. Ugh.
But it's
interesting
also
how they
so
did it.
sad, like the squalor that the baby is playing in. But the
Yeah.
baby is playing.
Yeah.
Like you're completely right. Like we never see the baby like being abused, so that we don't see the signs. Like again, like couldn't remember when it happened. I just knew it was coming. Like every time I saw the baby, I'm like, when is it going to happen? When is it going to happen?
Yeah.
And then it kicks you in the gut when it does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which it should, because that's how it felt to our characters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It felt weird watching that while I was literally holding our sleeping baby. And I'm just like, I'm just going to look down at her because I can't handle it. I've seen this movie one time with it and I don't want to see it again. And then I saw it.
I know, because it cuts to it like 3 times,
Yeah.
I think, total. And then I was like, no, Jordan, keep looking away. And then you had looked up by then, like right when it came back to it, and I was like, oh boy.
Yep.
But it's really horrendous. Yeah.
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 Because just to talk about that, they just like are like coming out of a fog of being high, and then they're just hearing the mother screaming and screaming, and they go to the crib. They see the child has passed, and they all have no idea what to do. Sick boy gets mad at him, Renton, for not saying something.
Yeah.
And then, like you said earlier, they choose to not face that reality.
Yeah. To
Right.
get high again. And, this woman who's just lost her child, she's asking, like, please give me a hit. And Renton's like, I need one first, and then I will give you yours.
Well, he doesn't even say it. It's just but not
yeah.
before me. That was understood.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like it's such a creepy element of it all, where it's like, no. We all understand that we're all like fucking jonesing for the next hit. Like you can't skip the line. Like you can't have
Exactly.
someone like pass up because you understand that they need to take their hit first.
Right.
Like it is this sort of like weird predatory or desperate kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's so sad, and even when people are being selfish, like it's the selfishness that comes from the addiction, and like it's just depressing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
But before that, when things are
Yeah.
good, because like, I'm sorry, listeners, like obviously 3 parents and 3 new parents on the line are going to like harp on the baby stuff, because like, oh my God, we all knew when we signed up for this one.
Yeah.
But let's talk about earlier. Like, so when Rent gets off the skag, he talks about it being the sick boy method, which I think is really funny.
Right.
He goes through in great detail, like what that is. And then it's like, after he's already like boarded himself up, he's like, and also just one last hit to get me off. And it's funny. And he goes and gets suppositories. And like, that's hilarious.
Yeah, it is.
It's also a great tie-in because Mikey Forrester is the character at the end who like gets them hooked up on this like really big deal.
Yeah.
So it's good setup and payoff, because it's just like, normally I wouldn't have anything to do with this fuck up. So that that when they're involved in this whole situation, like it's not coming from a place of like someone knows what they're getting into.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And then, of course, he goes to the worst toilet in Scotland.
Right. Because heroin makes you constipated. And when you're coming off heroin, all of a sudden, you're no longer constipated.
It's insane. And this sequence, there's no way to watch it without gagging, right?
Oh gosh.
No. I mean, I guess you could kind of like disassociate and be like, well, I see how they shot this sequence
Yes,
here, and he's
exactly.
floating in water and there are mines in the water.
Yes.
And like it's Ewan McGregor like doing this swimming.
Yes. Yeah. I forgot about later in the movie when Spud poops the bed.
Oh,
I forgot
Yep.
that scene entirely.
Yeah.
That was also very hard to watch.
truly, for this watch, I didn't really remember anything
Yeah.
except for the ceiling, death, and the toilet. So like every scene I was like, what happens here? I don't remember.
Yeah.
And everything with Begsby, I was like, I know this guy's crazy, but I forgot how crazy he
Yeah.
Oh
is.
yeah, I totally forgot how crazy he was.
Yeah.
And that's like roughly the next scene, right? When like Begbie gives his like whole story, and it's like, and that was it. That was Bigby's story.
And then did he say like later on, but Tommy will give me the real version of the story.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah,
It's one of his many weaknesses. He never tells a lie. He never cheats on anyone. He never does drugs.
Yeah. And he throws the mug over the side, and I would think he just is like, let's do it. Let's start a fight. I'm bored. I told my story. It's go time.
Yeah.
And then it's almost like he's putting on a show for his friends because they're all just up there looking down on him.
Yeah. And just a great touch. There's like some glass that like hits Ewan McGregor's hand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he like pulls back and like sucks on his finger. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, that's just like kind of stuff that makes movies so much better.
Yeah.
One thing we didn't talk about in the opening monologue, which is so good, and it continues to here, which is that every single time a character says you shouldn't do drugs, they're doing either alcohol or smoking a cigarette, or in Bigby's case, he has a cigarette, a shot, and a beer all in front of him. Like,
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I don't think I've noticed that.
when his parents are like filling yourself with that filth, like they're drinking. Like everyone is constantly drinking or doing something in this.
Right.
Oh, wow. What a good observation. Yeah, I did not clock that.
It's fascinating. I'm curious if the book maybe could even get into it more, but I would say semi early on in the movie when Renton, I think it's one of his voiceovers, he's talking about his parents, and he basically says like his mom is the socially acceptable form of an addict.
Yeah, with the Valium.
Prescription pills. And it would have been interesting to see like what that was like a little bit more. And that's not a criticism. I think this movie's perfect, but it's just fascinating that
you can watch Requiem for a Dream to see that story.
I guess I've seen that movie, and I don't want to rewatch that movie either. But it's just interesting that he made that point as well. So his parents are like, you gotta get off the stuff. You got, be a part of society. And he's like, well, you guys have to, you mom have to take drugs in order to be part of society.
Yeah.
There's an opiate effect just to like participate that is in play here. And like there's this argument that like, well, I'm just going to back out completely by way of going even harder than what would be the socially acceptable version of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And as a very side note, I do think that's the best part of Requiem for a Dream is the storyline with the prescription drug abuse.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's the strongest part of that movie. Having seen it only once and to never revisit it again.
Like, let's just be clear for everyone. Like, anyone in the audience who's like, yeah, I have only watched it once too. That's on purpose. Like, it is a movie that is designed for you only to watch once and then be like, man, did you see that movie? It's like Dogville. Like, if you've ever seen Dogville, you know why no one ever rewatches Dogville. Like, because it's a movie where it's just like, oh man, that was a rough movie. I can't believe I got through it. I'm glad I did. I'm not going back there.
Exactly. Yeah, actually, what was funny about when we watched Trainspotting, we watched the first hour and then had to pause it to go to bed.
Yeah,
finish it another day. And in a way, I would think I had said something like, maybe we should just finish it because this is one of those movies where I almost need that, like, not that necessarily this movie ends and everyone's clean. That's why we have Trainspotting too. But like, I needed that story catharsis where I just needed this to end.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah.
Because there's so much dread.
And then we had to wait
And then we had to wait.
almost 48 hours to watch the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
The last half hour. But luckily, since it's so, it's not like we're watching Primer or something. It's pretty easy to just jump back into the random part of the movie.
Totally.
So then, I forget which happens next. Is it the Spud job interview sequence, or is it the Tommy, like they steal the sex tape and then they go to the club?
I think it's that. I think that's next. The club stuff.
And
I think the Spud actually happens before the Bigby story. So that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So Spud tells this whole, or rather, we reveal that like even though he's getting off the skag, he's still on the speed.
Yes.
And we get this very funny sequence of Spud just like talking way too fast to get like kicked off this like job interview because he's like in welfare, and so in order to keep welfare, he has to like go for job interviews, but he has to fail it without being obviously failing.
Yes.
in order to keep doing so. And it's a funny sequence more than anything else. Like there isn't like a lot to it besides like, this is what Spud's deal is, which is that he wants to keep living as like off of like the government teat. And like me saying those words, I feel really bad because I'm lefty as fuck. And I'm like, well, we should have like a UBI and we should have like basic like housing for everyone. But and that would have solved a lot of problems for these characters right here, just for the record. Like the squalor they live in, if they were being provided like clean apartments, wouldn't have happened. And like a lot of this stuff wouldn't have been an issue. Moving on to like, so at the tail end of the Bigby like fight sequence, we cut back to Tommy's apartment where he's working out, and Rent is like going through his tapes, and like that was like a visceral memory of having like lots of cassette tapes, or DVDs, like just physical media in general. But especially when you had like burned DVDs or like burnt, you know, like here's the movies I've ripped and stuff like that, or like in this scenario, here's like home VHSs or stuff I've like recorded off the TV or the telly, if you will, for the era,
for our British
including
listeners.
a sex tape, and that's so much fun because it's the segue into what is without a doubt the reason why like I think this movie is appealing to young people, because like we're about to get into a very sexy sequence, which is like them at the club, which leads into one of the best needle drops in the movie, of a movie that has like tons of great needle drops.
Every needle drop is the best needle drop.
But we get like funny sequences of them all hanging out at the bar. We get the girls talking with the guys talking.
Yep.
Like those are really funny. Like we get when they come back together and it's like, what are you two talking about? Football, shopping. Like
yeah.
Oh, and I love when they are having that conversation, especially as someone who is not British or Scottish. And like a lot of the dialogue goes over my head. I just love that the subtitles are translating and basically only giving us like 20% of the words that they're actually using, which I just think is a hilarious detail.
Yeah, I loved that.
So they'll just say this big long thing and then it says big long thing.
Yeah.
And yet I said 2 sentences about it.
Yeah.
It's like,
well, I mean,
crazy.
like it doesn't say big long thing. It does say the like a transcription rather than a translation per se.
Yeah. It's just such a great. All those little things just give this movie so much style. And again, it's like you see that in movies all the time now, and I feel like it doesn't have the charm that something like this has in it. But yeah, then they all go back home with girls, Renton and
all of them,
Spud. Well, specifically those two.
And Tommy.
Also Tommy with Lizzie,
right,
because they
because
find
that's the
out
payoff
that they don't have their sex tape anymore.
And they're like ripping up the apartment, and he's in so much distress, and so is she.
Yeah, the line "I must have returned it by mistake" is on the one hand so relatable, and on the other hand such an anachronism now.
Yeah.
But yeah, Renton winds up to be with someone who's underage.
Yeah.
Forgot about that detail.
Me too.
And then Spud falls asleep.
Yeah.
Before everything begins, and she comments about how small he is, which
also like
is a little
good use of like the
wild thing to
wide angle
say.
shot, because like when you actually look at him, I'm like, oh, I'm actually kind of jealous.
It's that maybe they should have chose a different actor for that sentence that she says. It doesn't make any sense what she's saying. Anyway, and then it's poop sheets.
Okay.
I'm just listing them out, and then we can dive into anything.
Well, so
but
they all
that's
wake up the
everything.
morning after, and it's terrible. Like Tommy and Lizzie are like at the video store waiting for it to open so that they can try to like go through any videos that have been dropped off recently.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which is just a terrible situation to be in. Rent wakes up. It's like kind of like a madhouse when he wakes up, like someone like rides by on a bicycle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't yet remember that she was underage, so I thought like, is she like in college and this is like a dorm? Like, what is happening?
Yeah.
I was confused. But
And he kind of makes that joke, and then it's like, oh, never mind. I was having breakfast with your parents.
Yep.
Oh yeah, that is so awkward.
Also more
sequence.
awkward when you're not quite that, like when you're 20 and you're looking at this, it's like, okay, I relate to Rent because I'm 20 in the situation, and like a 16-year-old girl, I may not immediately like recognize the age gap. But as someone who will be 40 within the year, I'm looking at this being like,
whoa.
both of you are fucking babies, but like it's goddamn terrible regardless. And also, if this was my daughter, I would fucking murder you.
This is why I'm glad we brought you on.
My sweet baby girl.
But yeah, Spud wakes up. He's pooped the bed, much like Frank, and it's always sunny.
Yeah.
And he brings out the sheets and he's like, "Hey, I'm just gonna go do the laundry." And the mom is
and
like,
the parents are so fucking chill. They're like,
so
it's
nice.
okay. It's okay to get kind of pissed. Oh, you had an accident in the bed? That's fine. Like,
I know.
legitimately,
They're so
like,
nice. They made him breakfast.
They made him breakfast and they knew he had like at least done something in the bed.
Yes.
Like it just got worse because he was so embarrassed.
Oh, I know.
and then they're fighting over the sheet, and it goes everywhere. And much like the worst toilet in Scotland, it is like, oh,
Yeah.
I can't believe this isn't a movie.
Yeah.
And I can't believe I
is
think
honestly
this movie's
like
perfect.
the grosser scene because it's not as abstract. Like it's just there.
Yeah.
And like they're eating like beans and stuff. Like
Yeah. That's awful.
or like bangers
gnarly.
and mash. Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then we have the baby scene, which I think we've covered.
Yeah.
Unless we have anything else to say.
Well, no. We have the whole sequence of like Tommy getting like depressed because like Lizzie dumps him.
Mhm.
And
right.
that
He
like is what
asks,
gets them.
Yeah.
No. This is before he gets on the Skag. Like this is when he like takes them up like to the north and it's
Yes.
like we're gonna walk up to that fucking mountain.
Oh, yeah.
And we get the whole "it's shite being Scottish" kind of speech, which
Yes.
is honestly like very astute. Like it's like I don't like some hate the English. I don't. They're just wankers. We had the unfortunate reality of being colonized by wankers. Like
Yeah.
that whole bit right there. And it's like, oh, that's actually like an interesting perspective of being like, yeah, no, look, we're not even the bad guys in the stories. We're the ones who didn't even like put up a fight against the bad guys in the story. Like, which I don't think I was ready to have that conversation in the 20s or like in my 20s about like colonization and like that kind of like what kind of scar that does even to like what you would argue are like the sort of like well-off countries like Scotland is like part of Western Europe, but like it is still like a country that has like been subjugated by like the English are like an interesting scenario because like they were kind of subjugated by the French for a period there, and so like it's just hurting people all the way down until all of a sudden you're ripping off your mates and like stealing their drug money. Like, it's the cycle of abuse that like just keeps on going.
Yeah. Another cycle showcased in Trainspotting. Like the wheels on a train, perhaps.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, that's a great sequence. Now,
so we do see them all like go in, like when they like make the what is the line? It's like an informed decision to get back on the Skag.
Yeah.
They and that's when we get the night clubbing montage. Again, like they have a lot of montages while they're on drugs because like things just sort of like fly, and we see them like breaking into houses. They walk into like an old folks home and just like walk off with a TV in front of them. Like, the whole sequence is so depressing and like and bleak, and then we get the kick in the balls.
Yeah. Which I think I've said my piece on. We're
good.
Yeah, we're all like okay, let's skip past it now. And then am I wrong that next is when they're on trial in the next set of events here?
It's I mean, so there's like a little bit more of a montage of it being like where now that the baby is dead, they're like they've truly just like gone all in for like fucking over people, and so they like we cut back to the opening like run away from the cops.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
And then that's when they like get put on trial.
That iconic shot of him putting his hands on the hood and looking at the driver and just smiling, which is like one of the best Ewan McGregor all-time scenes. Like that is like when
Looking
his
so
in
crazy.
memoriam at the Oscars is going to play that shot.
Well, and here's where we actually get the driver. In the opening sequence, we don't. We just see it from the driver's perspective. So here's where we see like how horrifying it looks to like a regular person.
Yeah.
But through the trial, Spud goes to jail.
Yeah.
Renton is getting clean. He's going through treatment. So the judge says, if you continue your treatment, you'll be fine. And is that when his parents are like, you are getting off of it. You are coming back home. We are locking you in your room.
Not quite.
detoxing.
Yeah,
This
no,
is when they
he
go
relapses again.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they go after the trial. They go to the bar. And
Yep.
they all celebrate him being like clean, and they're like, "You have
That's
to choose
right.
life," and they're all
That's
like doing
right.
shots to like choose life. Like,
Yeah.
that whole sequence. He sees
And then
Spud's mom.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And then he's like so upset about this, he like sneaks out, climbs over a wall
Yep.
like, this is where we get like a smash cut of him jumping over a wall to like jumping into Mother Superior's
Yes.
like drugged in.
Yeah.
And it's this like relapse cycle that we are seeing throughout the movie, just to remind us like, every time shit goes bad, they fall really deep into like a worse situation than they were in before.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's the great shot where he sinks into the floor too.
Yeah.
This time.
Mm-hmm.
And then he
And you think they call an ambulance, and then it's just like, no, here's a cab. The ambulance is for someone else that goes by.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, man, it is so hard to do comedy like this in situations
in
like
such a
this.
serious
Yeah.
situation.
Right.
Because he's like ODing. Well, I don't know if he's ODing,
Oh, he's ODing.
but
Yeah, he is.
okay.
He
Okay,
is.
it's
He's
just
doing
not
bad enough that the
I
person
think
who seems
I
to be
think
their
the
like
sinking on the
sensei of
floor-
drugs is
Yeah.
like, we're sending you to the
you're
hospital.
right. You're
I
right.
think the sinking in the floor is the personification of he is going to a point of no return if he does not get help.
I see what you're saying.
immediately.
Yeah.
And there's a great this was probably my favorite on watching this needle drop. I don't know the name of the song.
Perfect
but
Day.
Perfect
Yeah.
Day. Oh man, I was like, dang, that song is good. And just the juxtaposition again, like, I mean, I don't know the context of that song, but Danny Boyle talking about like the baggage of a song about a perfect day as he's ODing and he's going to the hospital and like oh man, when they pull him out, I don't know how they did it, but his head hits the concrete and I'm like,
Yeah.
ow.
I think it just hit the concrete.
I mean,
I
he
think.
kind of keeps it up, so
Yeah,
it mostly
yeah.
is his shoulders. But even that, I'm like,
They have several shots in this movie of people like falling back to the floor. Like Spud has one earlier, and so
Yeah.
does Rent. When they just do heroin and they just like fall back completely.
Yeah.
This movie is like a big fan of reminding you that you could have like a concussion just because you're doing drugs.
Yeah.
yeah, it's pretty brutal. And like on a technical level, I'm like, I just assume that they have padding that we can't see. I guess on your back you could easily have padding on that shot,
You're probably taught to fall a certain way too.
but
They also might crank it a little bit. Like they
Yeah,
might
that's
be
true.
shooting it and then like
Oh,
slightly
yeah.
speeding up the frame rate so that the hit feels more real.
yeah, that's probably it too.
Oh yeah,
And then drop like a melon on the floor and get like that audio. Like
Yeah.
yeah. And so then his parents pick him up and they're like, enough.
yeah.
We're locking you in the bedroom.
And so here is the spot where I have never related to like the parents in like in a movie more than in this moment when like his dad like carries him in. And like there's this like, yeah, he's my fuck up of a son, but he is my son. And I'm going to try to do what I can for him right now. Like that felt so tangible in a way that like I just didn't feel about things when I was 21. Like
Yes.
Yeah.
it's such a different moment there where all the way through like the sequence that happens, but then like there's something you need to do, Mock, like to like, like go do the AIDS test where it's just like, it doesn't matter like what the results are or anything. There's no judgment here because you're my son. I have to like see you through. Like,
Yeah.
it's a really interesting bit of acting going on there.
Yeah. And then he's having
And then we get the montage of getting
Yeah.
clean, which is like terrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty great like on like I feel like this scene is so fantastical that my brain always goes into like the movie making side and I'm just like,
So-
this is fun to watch. Like
this
all
scene-
these cool effects that are practical.
Does Sick Boy show up to mock him while he's getting clean? While he's detoxing?
I think he's a hallucination.
You don't think he was really there?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Because he's got a
I mean,
very
it's hard to say if he never was there because it could just be like, oh, all of a sudden I thought I saw him like sitting there like talking to my parents. Like it could be his friends came to visit or he might be hallucinating it. And I think that the movie allows for both to be the scenario.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Because he pretty much, I think in this scene too, he says like Sick Boy shows up to prove like how easy it is to get clean.
Yeah.
Like he's doing so well.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Just very interesting. Whenever I feel like Sick Boy is brought up, it's like through Renton's
in
eyes,
like competition.
it's how
with.
is Sick Boy better than him?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was that shot that you and I think we rewound because we were like, what? It's such a simple effect.
When he's under the sheets and he lifts up the sheets and Begbie's there, says something to him, lowers the sheets, and then pulls them off. And he's on the bed, and there's no way that actor could be there without.
And it really, I don't think there was a cut because there was no like clear thing. And then you just theorized that he was in the bed and he just rolled off. And I'm like,
that's the only thing I could think of.
I guess that's what he must have done.
Simplest explanation. I don't know.
But it was such an effective
I assume there was
trick.
a cut there, but like it's one of those things where the sheets like go in front of the camera, and it would be very easy to hide it.
No, but we went back, and it's not a clear.
But if you think
like
so,
that.
like, yeah, I mean, like, they're definitely doing like incredible work in terms of like trickery, just like get you to like be in this mode of like nothing is real and nothing is right.
Exactly.
And also, it's right to say Bigby said something because I have no idea what he said. It's like okay.
I kind of we don't put subtitles on unless we're watching an international feature.
Well, this would be international.
But this movie,
I know what you mean, though.
Non-English. But this movie, I was like, I almost was tempted to, but I almost feel like as an American, that's part of the immersion of this movie.
Yeah.
It's like, and especially with that scene with the subtitles, I think that's like proof of concept that Danny Boyle is like, you don't actually have to know everything they're saying.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So don't worry, Americans. I mean, I don't think he's making it with Americans in mind. But,
no, yeah, I know what you mean, though.
I don't think that every English person is understanding what Begsby is saying.
Yeah.
Because it's impossible to understand what he's saying.
Yeah.
But then he's clean, and he goes to London.
Well, this right when he gets
estate.
clean, though, he says one of the most interesting things to me throughout the movie because he's clean and he's with his parents, and he like goes to bingo with his mom, and he's doing voiceover, and this is when he says this is when the real pain starts. Physical pain is going away, and boredom and depression are starting again.
Yeah.
Which is like what has kind of led him, as well as societal pressures, to make the choice to do heroin. That was so fascinating.
Yeah, it's also roughly when he goes to see Tommy.
Yeah, that's right. And Tommy is completely like a different person now, addicted to drugs, and asking him if he has any, asking for money. Yeah,
and he gives him
AIDS,
money. I can't remember why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He has AIDS. I think I didn't clock that because of we may have had it a little too low because baby was sleeping.
Well, they're both fairly explicit in terms of like they say that like Renton won the lottery and that or won something.
Yeah.
And compare it, but they also have the graffiti outside of Tommy's place that says "AIDS junkie scum."
Oh, right. Yes,
that's right.
Case, you're like, Micah, there's a sign in the movie. Did you miss that?
When I say that I was like really into this movie, like I watched this movie a lot on DVD, like in like 2004. Like I think I probably watched it like over 100 times, mixed in with like all the other like indie movies and like counterculture movies of like that specific era. But this was one of mine. Like I said, there's no scene that I couldn't like quote. It's just like, what's the order? That would be where it's hard.
Yeah. I know. Watching it the second time, I was like, I should have seen this movie by like 5 times by now at least, which is kind of high for me. I'm not a big rewatcher. I mostly want to hit the newbies, but this one, I'm like, I'm gonna need to up this number by the time I pass this mortal coil. So then
he goes to London
and he starts doing real estate, and he's doing pretty well. But then there's this armed robber guy who shacks up with him. One Begsby. I think I wrote Brigsby, which is Brigsby Bear. Begsby.
Francis Begbie. Franco.
And I do love when he comes in and he's so mad, he's saying, how can it be armed robbery? It's a replica.
Right. That's such a funny goddamn scene.
I know.
Yeah.
Armed robbery. Then he like puts it to his head and starts pulling the trigger.
Yeah.
Like with a fucking replica. Totally missing the point, by the way.
Yeah,
of course.
And what does he tell? Because then Renton leaves to go to work, and Begbie throws the cigarette. Does he just like get more cigarettes?
Yeah.
Like come back with stuff.
Yeah, and then he's just
don't forget the fucking smokes.
That's what. Yeah.
And then this whole sequence, he's just it is like I'm having actual anxiety imagining living with someone who's acting like this.
So tiny.
And he's spitting on the floor.
Oh yeah.
And then of course, Sick Boy shows up, and now there's 3 of them. And I the joke of it panning to Ewan McGregor with 2 sets of feet by his head as they're sleeping from previously just 1 set.
Yeah.
Great touch. And yeah, so they're all in there, and
it's like just when he thinks, he's gotten rid of that old way of life for the best. He can't get away from it.
Yeah.
And it is to kind of, I know it's jumping forward, but like when we get to the end of the movie on the choice he makes, he's like the only way he can truly get away from them is by burning them. Right,
which is interesting. I mean, he obviously.
And I can't really remember the second movie, so I can't really remember how it shakes out.
Yeah, I know. I'm so excited to rewatch it. But yeah, it's interesting because burning them is the way to get rid of them, and it's in one sense it's like, well, that's the right thing to do. I mean, the right thing to do is probably maybe to flush the like 2 kilos of heroin down the toilet, so that the world doesn't have extra heroin, or that extra heroin specifically. But it's almost the right decision to make.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like, is that the right decision for his character? I think it's fascinating that he even, as a result, burned Spud, and he does say like that's potentially the only person I feel sorry for.
Yeah, but he does,
which is why he leaves the money for him.
Money. Yeah. Although I don't think he
and right here
is
where we get the setup for that. By the way, just if we're going to like try to keep chronologically. So Sick Boy asks Rent about his passport, and Rent's like, "Why would you want my passport?" It's like, "Oh, I could get good money for it." At which point Rent's like, "I need to put this in a safe," and so he like gets a locker and like puts it there, and that's the locker that he puts the money ultimately for Spud at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
But the point is like Sick Boy and Bigby are like parasites. They're like living off of him, and he's in this situation where it's just like this is not good, and he like moves them off to like one of the because Rent becomes a real estate agent in this period, and that's when we get like the sequence, which I'm like, was that just an ad like that like London Tourism had at one point?
I know,
put, whole cloth into the movie.
Interesting.
Bum digga bung digga bung.
I know it's interesting too because the people are interacting with the camera, which is just kind of odd. I'm like, I'm not quite sure what is supposed to be conveyed in that beyond, we're in London.
Yeah.
But it is like, I do feel like if you wanted to cut out the people looking at the camera and pointing at it, you would. So I'm not sure what the intentionality behind keeping those shots in is, but
like I said, it feels like London Tourism Board, and then he becomes a real estate agent for London, and like, okay, that all makes sense. And this is where like the music like changes over to being like that, like more modern music instead of like classic rock.
Yeah.
And so he like moves them into like the worst apartment that he has, like the one that he can't sell. And so then he's kind of like we are reminded about Diane at this point. Like she calls him up after like she had sent him a letter that like was the warning that Bigby was coming. But then they're like hanging out and they like clearly hook up again.
Yeah.
Because like she shows up and she like walks in and next thing they're like both in their underwear in bed. Which is like that's the right vibe. Like earlier in the movie is like when it's like lust, and this is like where it's like just more of like an adult relationship between the two of them. So like that's all good. And then the whole like them being at this like apartment goes bad, and we get like sucked back to Scotland.
Yeah. And is that Tommy's funeral?
Yep.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, they're like, we had other things, and they go back to Scotland for Tommy's funeral, and that's where Sick Boy gives the plan, which is the third act.
Yep.
Yeah, and so Tommy Tommy died, and was it from the cat poop thing?
He died of a stroke.
Toxoplasmosis.
Yeah.
Man, I just can't get over how gross that is.
Yeah, it's disgusting.
That'd be not the way to go.
No.
Yeah.
And
I am fine though.
I am pro.
Yeah, I like that they keep that note in there.
I am pro cats, but it is a good argument for a dog, you know.
Interesting.
But we'll get another cat someday.
Okay.
But do you have any animals?
My wife is super allergic to cats, even though I grew up with cats, so I wish we had a cat. We had a dog who passed away a couple of years ago, and that's right when we started trying to have a baby, so we didn't want to get one right when we had a baby, and then we just had a baby. So soon, hopefully. I miss having dogs because I've always had pets. And this is like the weirdest, longest stretch of time where I haven't had like an animal to be my, surrogate friend.
Yes. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, we had a cat for a while. That was your cat when you were a little girl.
Yeah.
And then he passed, and then we got a dog, and then I whenever we get a bigger house, I think we could probably get maybe a cat or a dog. But I don't know. He might not be okay with a cat. He might freak out.
I don't know. We'll figure it out.
Yeah. So then they have this plan. They're going to sell these drugs. They're going to have that big score.
Yeah.
Now, this is just heartbreaking to me. You're watching it. He's been clean for a while. He's been doing okay, but someone has to try the skag. And so he has to try it to see if it's like worth its salt. And he tries it. And then, of course, the next scene, they're on the bus, and he's like, well, I have to have one more hit before we do this thing. And you're like, he's back in it again.
Yeah.
Like, he'll never get out of this cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Until we find out 20 years later what happened to him. So then they're on the bus I think they're going back to London to do the score. And just a side note, seeing Begbie drinking that liquor straight, it was like hurting my stomach watching.
Yeah, it's like vodka straight as they drive.
Yeah.
And he's drinking in every shot it cuts to him. He's taking a swig. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have a headache imagining this. And so then they do the deal in if that apartment was cleaned up, that hotel room or whatever, a cool room.
That was like a by the hour hotel room.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I love the shape of it. I love a circle room. That's interesting.
It's like being in the Oval Office.
Maybe that's it.
I felt very presidential.
Where I've always been destined to go. But yeah, they do this handoff. They get 16,000 pounds for it.
Mm-hmm.
Or 14 stones. No, I'm kidding. And then they're all sleeping. No.
Well,
then they go to the bar with the money, and this scene is so brutal.
It's wild. But
Because,
right, isn't it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is it after this happens or before? Renton's narrating, and he says like we're all waiting for whoever's gonna screw each other. Like we're all thinking who is gonna steal the money, or we're all thinking about stealing the money. Is that what it was?
Yeah.
And then Begbie goes to the bar. He spills some beers when running into someone, and he takes one and shoves it like face toward a guy's neck, and it shatters on his neck.
Yeah, it's gnarly.
And starts a big fight, and he's
Cut
looking
Spud
at
in the process
Cut
by accident.
Spud.
Yeah.
He's looking at people like, you want some, let's go. And that's when you see that Renton is like, this is it. Like, this has to be the last straw. I have to get out of this.
Yeah.
And so then that night, he steals the money. After turning on the light and running the water in the same room with everyone, I was like, that's not a very smart plan.
Well,
Take
they had
the
all
money
been
and go.
drinking. Maybe they were just
Well, he
really
was
out of it.
testing to see if anyone would wake up.
Oh, you're right. You're right. Which is great, because I would rather think that than think that there's some mistake in the movie. Grabs the money, and it's like heartbreaking. He's walking out, and Spud is just wide-eyed looking at him, shaking his head.
With a tear in his eye.
Like, don't do it. Don't do it. And then he walks out. And then he goes on his way, and he starts doing the choose life. Or no, he says, I'm going to be just like you. I'm going to have the job. I'm going to have the kids. I'm going to have the family. And just starts listing stuff. And as he's listing it, Trainspotting.
Yeah.
Oh, that is good filmmaking. Oh my gosh, that hits so hard. And then Spud gets the money.
Yep.
And it's like, don't even think about there being a second movie. So, like, just thinking about this one movie.
Yeah.
You've seen all of the stuff that has happened and that they've gone into, and him more than once saying he'll get clean. And so for the movie to end with him actually having a lot of money now and being like, I will go get clean. Or not even, I will live the life that you guys are living right now. And it's like, why would I believe that?
Yeah.
You've like given, like, okay, yeah, you have a lot of money now, but you could spend that money on drugs.
Yeah.
So, and like a couple of scenes before that, you were shooting up again. It's just it's so fascinating.
Yeah. And also, to be clear, when we say a lot of money, like 16,000 pounds is roughly half the US dollar. So we're talking about roughly like let's say 40 grand just to like round up. Like 40 grand is a lot of money. Like that, like that will change your life, but it will not allow you to live a life of luxury at any point.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
No.
Like all it is like the next year I can figure my shit out. Like it's like it's not a like, well, I don't have to worry about things for a long time. It's like I don't have to worry about things for the next like 10 months.
Exactly.
Like,
Yeah.
Well, and what I think is really interesting. So I think it was last year, Blank Check covered Danny Boyle, and hearing them talk about this movie and Trainspotting too. I guess especially in Britain, there was like almost like a expectation, like you gotta make a sequel to this movie. And it's so interesting watching it because to me, this ends as like, okay, most of these guys don't make it to 30. Like this does not scream to me there should be a sequel to this movie in any regard. So it's kind of a miracle that they were able to make such a fantastic sequel because it then plays on the realities of what these guys
The
would
fallout
be.
of their decisions.
Yeah. The fallout of all your good intentions. Ethan Hunt.
Oh, yeah, great.
So yeah, I mean, I think this is a wonderful movie for any cinephiles listening. If you haven't watched it and you can handle it, I mean, it is a very graphic and intense movie. I'm sure a lot of people can't handle it, but it is just like top tier filmmaking. It's fantastic. And if you made it this far, wait a couple months till you forget the plot and then watch it.
And also don't watch it if you're a recent parent.
Sure. Yeah, I would say that too.
Yeah. That's a good, when you're in the planning stages, sit down and say, okay, let's watch this movie before we have this child. Do that.
Right.
And then when you have the kid, you can reflect on, wow, that'd be crazy to watch this now.
Right.
I think I was able to keep it pretty arm's length, but even still, it was like, ugh. Even still, I feel like a lot of like baby and kid stuff, it's pretty easy for me to put it out of my mind, but this one gets pretty close.
Yeah. How does it not?
Yeah, I mean, it's rough. But yeah, that's my piece with the movie. I love it. I can't wait to talk about the sequel next month.
Yeah.
Especially because I just have wanted to watch it, but I needed an excuse.
And that's why we're doing
And now
NPU, the sequel legacy.
Do you have some final parting words on this movie, Case?
So mostly just that it, like you said, it's perfectly constructed for what it is. Like it's a movie that takes a prose work with so much first person narration and somehow makes it into a coherent whole. And that's incredible. It's a movie that like caters to the vitality of the cast so well, and then at the end of it all, you like look back and you're like, that was a really sad existence that you had right there.
Yeah.
And the movie's not pulling any punches about that being a sad existence right there. So I don't have a lot more to say beyond what we said. It's really hard to watch as a parent. I relate a lot more to the parents, but at the same time, like, man, soundtrack, oops, all bangers, like so goddamn good. Like Born Slippy, the closing track on this one is so
insane.
Good. It doesn't have a melody. It's just that, but it's just good. And you're like, oh wow, that's a lot of fun right there. if nothing else, listen to the soundtrack. Like the whole soundtrack is so
Totally.
good.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the movie is definitely worthwhile, and it's so structurally sound, despite the fact that it is not really playing with like the normal conventions of screenplay formatting. It's an impressive work. And so if you can come at it and not be too affected by some of the material, and we've talked about that, like it's totally worthwhile, and like you definitely should. And if you are affected by the material, it's totally fine. Listen to the soundtrack and don't worry about the rest of it.
Yeah. What about you, Jordan?
Oh no, nothing. It's great.
Well, before we close up, I guess our patrons can know a little early. We're about to jump into Planet of the Apes on the main feed. And Case is going to be returning. So not only are you getting the Patreon episode with Case, we've booked him again. And you and I went back and forth and we hadn't decided which movie. I was thinking because of scheduling, it'd be great if you went on one of the newer movies. Does that sound good still?
Yeah, I think we agreed on Dawn. Was where we like
it's totally up to you. Nobody has reserved any ape movies, so
yeah. So listeners, so my podcast, Another Pass, we actually just did the original 5 in reverse chronological order, which was a trippy experience going as the budget just got bigger as those movies went on. And I'm a huge fan of the Planet of the Apes series. So like, I love talking about those movies. I think they have like great social commentary. I think there's like so much interesting stuff going on in them. And I think we resolved on Dawn, if only so I can tell the story of how I watched it without subtitles one time.
Okay. All right.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I will officially get you on the books for that. And so for us, two people who we've recorded our first episode, and I've seen Planet of the Apes, and I've seen Planet of the Apes by Tim Burton, and that's it. And you've seen both of those and Rise of the Planet of the Apes. The original series, what can we expect in terms of like, what did you like of those first 5?
Yeah, so first 5. So the second one, Beneath, is terrible. It's tied for last.
Good to know.
In my pantheon. And then it gets really weird all of a sudden because Escape is actually really good. It becomes sad at the very end, but it's a comedy for a good chunk of the movie, which is like just not what you expect for those. Conquest is a brutal, angry movie, but it is so good. And it roughly corresponds to Rise in terms of like storyline points because time travel shenanigans, but it's way meaner, which you'll find surprising. Battle is just low budget. Like they're doing a lot with what they can with the budget, but like it's a short movie, and but like because its budget is so small, like you can forgive it more than you can either Beneath or the Tim Burton ones. And then all Rise, Dawn, and War are all amazing movies. Like I love that trilogy so much. But of the originals, like yeah, like two's not that great. 3 and 4 are great. 5 is just like low budget and kind of disappointing as a result. But like they're doing good work with what they had. Is sort of the vibe. So I'm looking forward to hearing your responses to that because 3 is honestly, I think, my second favorite in the original series. And it's like, here's a 70s slice of life kind of comedy for a stretch there. And then 5, you're just like, yeah, fucking burn everything down. like, man.
Well, I'm excited. We just got, I mean, after rewatching the first Planet of the Apes, I just am like so hyped, and I'm fully hoping to even though you just said Beneath is terrible, I'm hoping to be like, but I figured out why it's not terrible.
There
like,
are
I
good
just want
things
to love
in Beneath.
all
Like
of them.
all of them have something I like about them. Like,
Okay, good.
I have Beneath and Burton tied, and like anyone who knows the Burton movie knows that it has the best special effects you can imagine for
It's
like
insane,
prosthetic ape costumes, and it has a Danny Elfman score. So like for that to
Good
be
point.
tied for last, like Beneath has an interesting stuff going for it. But it's just the first one is so good.
I mean, it's insane.
It's so incredible when you watch it with like open eyes and you like look at that first like third where it's just the humans and you don't even have the apes yet. Like it's a good chunk of the movie before the apes show up, and it's just like, oh right, I forgot how sad and desperate they are by the time anything starts going really bad for them, and then things go really bad for them. It's so well crafted, and it's such a wonderful social commentary. It was almost impossible to do like a great sequel.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But well, we're excited to jump into that. And also, please, for our patrons, tell them where to find you.
So
Almost
you
forgot.
can find me on the the at-based platforms, I should say, at Case Aiken, except for Instagram, where I'm holding on to my AIM screen name from high school for dear life, and that's at Quetzalcoatl5. That's with a Q, because I was a pretentious classical studies major even back in high school. And then you can find the shows I work on at certainpov.com. So I work on Another Pass, which is a movie analysis show. Micah, you've been on that. And I also do Men of
Speaking
Steel,
of
which
prosthetics.
yes, we were talking about the Island of Dr. Moreau on that one.
Oh, wow.
Coming right off of our Planet of the Apes thing. And so
Right,
we're like, we're doing more prosthetic animal people. Cool.
Yeah. Oh, man.
And then I also do Men of Steel, which is a Superman and Superman adjacent discussion about the fantasy of being a Superman type character and why that is appealing. So both of those you can find at certainpov.com. On YouTube, you can find Certain POV Media, where we have full episodes up there. We have clips, and we have series that we put up that are their own thing, such as my Superman analog series, where I post videos about characters and give like a 5-ish minute sort of breakdown about what I think is important about a character who's like kind of Superman inspired. And so that, again, you can find at YouTube at Certain POV Media, or just go to certainpov.com. You will find all of my stuff and tons of other people's great shows. I work with a wonderful host of podcasters, and they are all doing incredible work. So I want to give them all a shout out. But yeah, that's where you can find me and my stuff.
Great.
Awesome.
And are you pro James Gunn? Are you not excited?
I am very excited. I love the Guardians movies. Like James Gunn, I think, has a really good hook on this. I love the casting choices we've seen so far. I am very excited for what they bring out for the next wave of Superman.
Yep. Me too. Can't wait. Okay. Well, thanks for listening, patrons. Next month, it will be T2 Trainspotting as we continue our MPU, the sequel legacy series. See you next week.
Bye.
No, next month.
Month. Bye.
This is the Macabre Podcast Universe. It's the podcast that exists to
Prove people wrong when they say
sequels
are never
better
than
the
originals.
And I never wear hats when we record.